Fever time! Bow, bow, bow!
There we go!
Why did a regular season game suddenly feel like war? Because this wasn't just basketball, this was payback. 10 months after Skylar Diggins slammed into Caitlin Clark during a game that spiraled into chaos, the Indiana Fever finally got their shot at redemption. And they made it count. Everyone remembers what happened in August 2024. The Fever were crushing Seattle. Clark was lighting it up, on the verge of a record-setting night. The Storm were getting embarrassed on their home court, and just as Clark turned to the crowd to celebrate, boom, Diggins blindsided her with a shoulder check on the way to the bench, unprovoked, unsportsmanlike, and completely out of line. The footage went viral within minutes. Fans were stunned. Some called it dirty. Others said it was flat-out assault. No technical, no ejection, just silence from the league, and a smirk from the Storm bench. And that silence? It echoed, especially in the Fever locker room. The Storm acted like nothing happened. Not only did they avoid accountability, they flipped the script. Reports surfaced of Diggins getting emotional post-game, claiming she was disrespected because the Fever didn't pull their starters during a blowout.
No wonder nobody watches. This is one of the reasons why people can't stand this league.
Seriously, the narrative got twisted. Suddenly, Clark was the villain for playing too well, for humiliating a team that couldn't keep up. Fever fans saw through the act, but Seattle? They kept crying victim while downplaying a cheap shot that never should have happened. Caitlin Clark looked off from the very first possession. Her shots weren't just missing, they were ugly, flat, off balance. Her usual confidence wasn't there. And the Seattle crowd? They smelled blood. Every time she bricked a shot, they roared louder, almost begging her to collapse under the pressure. And let's be honest, they thought they had her. But what they didn't see coming was that the rest of the Fever squad had zero plans to let Clark's off night define them.
Who's going to step up on this Indiana Fever team when Caitlin Clark doesn't have it, when the shot's not falling?
Aliyah Boston stepped up like she was tired of being overlooked. She bulldozed through the Storm defense like it was personal. Every time she got the ball, she made them pay. 31 points, career high, no fluke, just raw power and purpose. She didn't just want to score, she wanted to dominate. And she did. Seattle had no answers. They couldn't even slow her down, let alone stop her. But Boston wasn't the only one unleashing something different.
Field, do you want to know what was the most impressive part about Aliyah Boston's games tonight? Not only was it going up against, I almost called her Nneka Ogwumike. Not only was it going up against Ezi Magbor, but it was not coming off of solely slip screens.
She dropped 31 points, her career high, and made it look easy. These weren't quiet bucket. Every shot told the Storm, you're not in control anymore. She spun through double teams. She bullied her way through contact. And she made Seattle's post players look like they weren't even there. When her teammates needed a lift, she delivered. When Clark couldn't find her rhythm, Boston created one of her own. It wasn't just scoring, it was leadership through domination.
Great game by Aliyah Boston. Great game by Kelsey Mitchell. I'll talk a little bit later. Yeah, I don't know what the hell's wrong with Caitlin Clark, but like, I don't even know if she should be in, like.
But what really exposed Seattle's weakness was how Boston didn't stop on offense. She owned the glass with 8 boards and grabbed 2 steals that snatched momentum away from the Storm like it was nothing. She wasn't just scoring, she was disrupting everything Seattle tried to build. They came in thinking Clark was the only threat, and by the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. Boston had already taken over the game on both ends. And here's the part no one wants to admit. Seattle had no answers because they didn't respect her enough. They geared up to shut down Clark, but they forgot who Aliyah Boston really is. A national champion, a top draft pick, and now, a silent assassin who just embarrassed them on their home floor. While Seattle looked confused and flat-footed, Boston played with purpose and precision. She didn't talk, she just worked. And every bucket was another reminder that ignoring her was a mistake they wouldn't recover from.
Kelsey Mitchell played a top-notch game today as well. Those two ladies are the reason why we won. Aliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell stepped up when it mattered the most. Lexie Hall had herself a game today as well.
Lexie Hull, who'd never posted a double-double in her career, suddenly turned into a rebounding machine. She was out jumping taller players, crashing the glass, and grabbing loose balls like her life depended on it. 11 rebounds, 15 points, and all heart. She was in every lane, every corner, and every play that mattered. The Storm tried to ignore her. Bad move. Hull made sure her name was impossible to forget.
I was hosting a live, and in the chat, I was thinking we have to give her a nickname. So, there was somebody that said the Lexecutioner, T-Rexy Lexie. But she's coming into her own, and she's fighting back on that court sometimes, especially against the foul calls. Definitely would never have thought this last season.
From the first whistle, Hull played like she had something to prove. And she did. She wasn't just chasing rebounds, she was ripping them away from players taller, stronger, and supposedly better. 11 boards, most of them snatched away from stunned Seattle forwards who had no idea what hit them. She was everywhere, on the ground, in the paint, around every loose ball. And with every rebound, the Storm looked more rattled. Then came Kelsey Mitchell, cool, confident, and absolutely locked in. While Clark was cold, Mitchell lit it up. 5 threes, 26 points, and every bucket felt like a dagger. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She just kept shooting and hitting. And what made it even more insane, that was her 14th game with 25-plus points and 5-plus threes, pushing her into the WNBA record books. Mitchell didn't just help carry the team, she led it. Seattle thought they could humiliate the Fever by shutting down Clark, but what they really did was open the door for Indiana's depth to shine. And what was exposed that night? The Storm were a one-dimensional team obsessed with stopping one player, while the Fever proved they were evolving into a complete, dangerous squad. The kind you can't game plan against. The kind that finds a way, even when their star can't. What happened in Seattle wasn't just surprising. It was a turning point. A wake-up call for every team that thought Indiana was still soft, that they were just Clark and a supporting cast. That idea got shattered. Because this time, when Clark struggled, the Fever didn't fall, they fought. And Seattle had no clue how to handle it. The media painted the Indiana Fever as a one-woman show. Caitlin Clark gets the credit. She gets the blame. She gets all the headline. But this game, it shattered that lazy narrative. Because when Clark struggled, the team didn't collapse. They came alive. What Seattle expected was a meltdown. What they got instead was a full-force attack from a squad that finally figured out who they are. The Fever didn't need a hero. They needed each other. And that's exactly what they became. Aliyah Boston bullied the paint like she owned it. Lexie Hull tore through bigger defenders like size didn't matter. Kelsey Mitchell lit up the perimeter like it was her personal practice gym. Every player stepped in with something to prove. And together, they made one thing very clear. This isn't Clark and company anymore. This is a team, dangerous, balanced, and hungry. And that exposed the Storm's biggest flaw. They didn't come prepared for the depth. Last year, the Fever would have folded. They relied too much on one player to bail them out. And when she couldn't, they fell apart. But not this time. This time, the whole roster stepped into the spotlight. They rotated better. They communicated. They didn't argue or panic. They trusted each other. That's not talent, that's growth. That's what Seattle didn't see coming. And it's exactly why they got caught off guard. The most embarrassing part for Seattle? They played the same old game. Trash talk, cheap shots, and an over-reliance on intimidation. But intimidation doesn't work when your opponent's bench is just as dangerous as their starters. The Storm spent all their energy on one player. Meanwhile, the rest of the Fever took over the show. That wasn't just a win. That was a statement. We're deeper. We're tougher. And we're not here to be pushed around anymore. The final buzzer didn't just mark a win, it marked a shift. The Fever didn't just beat the Storm, they humiliated them. 94-86, and every point screamed, we remember. That August body check? It became the fuel. The disrespect? It built this fire. Coach Stephanie White didn't sugarcoat it. She praised her team's growth, the discipline, the way they stayed calm while Clark struggled. That's not luck, that's evolution. This team got tired of being called soft, tired of being labeled Clark and the rest. Now, the whole league sees it. This squad has heart, fire, and depth. This win meant more than just a number in the standings. It was personal. For nearly a year, the Indiana Fever were forced to bite their tongues while the league, the media, and rival teams disrespected them. The body check on Caitlin Clark didn't just bruise her physically, it bruised the entire team's pride. They were laughed at, dismissed, called soft. Meanwhile, the player who initiated it, praised like nothing happened. And the league? Silent. No fines, no statement, no accountability. The message was loud and clear, deal with it. So they did, quietly, internally. They turned every practice into a promise, every loss into motivation, every game into a slow build up to this moment. When June 2025 finally rolled around and they saw Seattle on the schedule again, they didn't just prepare, they locked in. Because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about finally being heard without having to say a word. What made it sweeter was how it all played out. Clark had her worst shooting night of the season. She wasn't the one hitting big shots. She wasn't the one making headline. But instead of panicking, her teammates rose up and finished what started last August. And the entire time, the Storm looked confused, like they expected another meltdown. But that's what exposed them. They didn't realize they weren't facing the same team from last year. The celebration after the final buzzer said it all. It wasn't just joy, it was release. You could see it in their faces. The weight of a year's worth of frustration finally lifted. The hugs, the shouts, the pure energy, that wasn't just about beating a rival. That was about reclaiming their identity. No longer victims, no longer ignored. Now, respected, dangerous, and united. And while Seattle sulked, wondering how it all slipped away, Indiana smiled. Not because they won a game, but because they won everything that moment stood for. And what happened next would make it impossible for the league to ignore them ever again. You could hear it in Coach Stephanie White's voice. This wasn't just a win. This was proof. Proof that her team wasn't soft. Proof that all the doubt, the criticism, the disrespect they took all season long had finally turned into something powerful. And the best part? She didn't have to beg them to figure it out. They chose to grow. They chose to fight. And when things got tough, they didn't fall apart. They leaned in. In that locker room, it wasn't just celebration, it was validation. Coach White called out the consistency, the trust, the way the team played through breakdowns without panicking. No wild finger pointing, no sideline drama, just focus and unity. That's the part no one sees on the stat sheet. The moments where teams usually snap, Indiana held together. And that's exactly what separated them from the Storm. Players were giving each other credit like it was candy. Mitchell praised Boston. Boston praised Hull. Everyone praised the communication. They weren't just playing for themselves anymore, they were playing for each other. That kind of chemistry doesn't show up overnight. It takes losses, it takes frustration, and it takes guts to keep pushing when the whole league is waiting for you to fold. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room. Seattle expected them to break. That was the whole strategy. Rough them up, shake Clark early, then watch the rest unravel. But that plan blew up in their face. Because while Seattle tried to play mind games, Indiana was too locked into care. They didn't argue. They didn't whine. They executed. And by the time Seattle realized they were in trouble, it was already too late. So when Coach White stood in that locker room and said she was proud, she wasn't just talking about points or rebound. She was talking about the bigger shift, the culture change, the identity. This team no longer plays like they're hoping to win. They play like they expect to. And if that doesn't scare the rest of the league, it should, because this version of the Fever, they're just getting started.